My name is Captain Maria Thompson. It was just past 0600 when I poured my first cup of coffee in the mess hall at Fort Bragg. The base was still half asleep, humming softly with the sounds of distant trucks and a few early risers out on the track. I had my usual corner by the window where I could catch the morning fog rolling off the field and pretend, just for a minute, that peace was something you could drink in slowly. I was mid-sip when my phone buzzed. It was a message from my sister, Liz. Short, cold, "We're going with Mark's family this year, just easier that way." There was no, "Wish you could come," or "Hope you're doing okay." Not even a polite excuse. Just a clean cut, like a scalpel through something that still had nerve endings. I stared at the screen, and for a moment, I honestly thought I'd read it wrong. It shouldn't have hit that hard. After all, it wasn't the first time I'd been left out. But something about the way she wrote it, like I was just a scheduling inconvenience, made it feel final. Not forgotten. Erased. I sat there in uniform, with my name stitched above my heart, 3 deployments under my belt, and a chest full of commendations that never seemed to matter at home. I've faced mortar fire and convoy ambushes, but nothing bruises quite like knowing your family doesn't see you. Not really. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I thought about replying, asking why, or maybe just pretending I understood. But then I put the phone down. What was the point? The message was loud enough. The mess hall stayed quiet as soldiers filtered in. I watched them laugh, nod good mornings, talk about turkey plans, and who was flying home. That used to be me. The one trying to make it work. The one trying to earn a seat at a table that never had a place card with my name. That morning, something inside me finally settled. Not broken, just done. I wasn't going to chase people who made me feel like an afterthought. I didn't know it yet, but that message, cruel in its simplicity, was the best thing that could have happened. Because for the first time in years, I stopped looking for a seat at their table and started building one of my own. I used to think maybe I was just imagining it, that every missed birthday, every shrug when I brought home a good grade, every photo on the wall where I wasn't in the frame, was just an accident. But even as a kid, I knew when something wasn't fair. Liz was the golden child. She had that effortless charm that made people lean in when she spoke. My mom used to say Liz could light up a room just by walking into it. I guess that made me the one turning off the lights. I remember in 4th grade, I won 2nd place in a countywide science fair. I built a working volcano with baking soda and vinegar, hand-painted the whole thing, and even wrote a report with citations. When I got home, trophy in hand, Mom barely looked up from the stove. She asked if I remembered to take the trash out. That same week, Liz got a lead part in the school play. The whole family showed up with flowers and posters. I sat in the back, still in my science fair shirt, wondering what it would take to be seen. By middle school, I'd stopped expecting applause. I played soccer, ran track, joined the student council, and brought home straight A's. No one noticed. No one asked. At one point, I thought maybe if I stopped doing anything, someone would finally ask why. But that silence just stretched wider. The worst was the year Liz had her big dance recital. Dad missed my end-of-year awards ceremony because he said he couldn't be in 2 places at once. I remember sitting on that auditorium stage, clutching my certificate while other kids ran to their parents for photos. Mine never came. And still, I told myself it wasn't personal. That maybe Liz needed them more. That maybe they were just tired. I didn't want to believe that I was easy to overlook. In high school, I wrote an essay that got published in a national teen magazine. I left a copy on the kitchen counter, hoping someone would read it. It disappeared the next day. No one said a word. I learned to be proud in silence, to celebrate alone. I started keeping things to myself, not because I didn't care, but because it hurt less when no one cared back. Liz's prom photos covered the hallway walls. Her framed certificates took over the mantel. Mine stayed in drawers, tucked between old report cards and soccer medals no one ever asked about. There was never any yelling, no harsh words. Just that constant, quiet reminder that I was background noise, useful, reliable, but never the one anyone waited up for. It didn't make me bitter. Just tired. Tired of trying to earn attention that never came. Tired of shrinking so Liz could shine brighter. Sometimes I wondered if I was just built differently. Less shiny. Less lovable. More work. But even that felt like an excuse for something deeper. A choice they kept making. Over and over. And I was the one left learning how to disappear without anyone noticing. I enlisted the summer I turned 18. No gap year, no backup plan. Just a quiet ride to the recruiting office and a duffel bag that held more hope than clothes. I didn't say much to my parents, and they didn't ask many questions. When I told them I'd signed up, my mom blinked twice, then asked if I remembered to fill out the FAFSA. Part of me thought the uniform would change things, that maybe if I came home in boots and brass, they'd finally see me. It felt like a statement, like proof. I could do something big, something brave. But when I graduated from basic training, they didn't make the trip. Liz posted a photo of her engagement ring that same week, and suddenly, my Facebook wall was flooded with family. Congratulations, none for me. The first time I deployed, I sent postcards from Kuwait. I FaceTimed from tents and airfields, shared little clips of sandstorms and stories about the kids we helped. Most of them went unanswered. Once, my dad replied, asking if I'd seen the Patriots game. He said he forgot I was overseas. Meanwhile, Liz moved into a new condo. My parents threw her a party, posted photos with banners and wine glasses clinking. I watched it all from my bunk halfway across the world, biting back that familiar sting. It wasn't even about jealousy. It was about feeling like I never quite existed in the same way. I got promoted to sergeant, sent the photo in full dress uniform. All I got back was a thumbs up emoji. 3 years later, I made captain. No call. No card. Just silence that stretched so wide, it swallowed the pride I used to feel. I kept trying, hoping. Every home visit I'd bring stories, challenge coins, and photos of my unit. And every time, I left with the same hollow ache. Like I'd built a life worth sharing, but no one wanted to hold it. Eventually, I stopped expecting a reaction. The ache didn't go away. It just stopped surprising me. By then, I wasn't hurt. I was exhausted. Exhausted from knocking on a door that was never going to open. It was the quiet that got to me. Not the kind that hums at night, but the kind that fills a kitchen in the middle of the day when no one calls, and nothing is expected. I stood there, hands wrapped around a half-warm mug, watching the wind move through the trees outside my window, and something in me just stopped. Not everything breaks loudly. Sometimes it just settles, like a tired breath after holding it in too long. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even surprised anymore. I was just done pretending that if I kept showing up, they'd eventually save me a seat. I looked around that kitchen. Clean counters, a stove I'd learned to cook on during leave, and photos on the fridge of people who did show up. Friends, battle buddies, a neighbor who once brought me soup after surgery. And I thought, maybe this was enough. I'd spent years bending, shrinking, waiting to be chosen by people who had already made their choice. Maybe they weren't cruel. Maybe they were just indifferent. But I couldn't keep making excuses for their absence while ignoring the presence of those who cared. There's something oddly freeing about letting go of a losing fight. Not bitter. Not dramatic. Just a quiet shift inside. Like moving furniture. You finally realize it doesn't fit the room. That morning, I walked out to the back porch. The sky was clear, cold. My boots crunched against the frost-covered boards, and I breathed in that crisp Vermont air. 30 acres. Mine. Paid for in sweat and sacrifice. A space where I could build something from the ground up, where I didn't have to audition to belong. I wasn't chasing anyone anymore. Not their approval. Not their guilt. Not the version of me they kept overlooking. I remembered something my grandfather once said when I was little. Build your own damn table. I think he meant it as a joke, but it stuck. And for the first time in my life, I knew exactly what it meant. So I made a decision. I wasn't going to mourn another Thanksgiving I didn't get invited to. I was going to host my own. Not out of spite, out of clarity, out of peace. And this time, I'd invite only the people who made me feel like I belonged without having to earn it. The next morning, I pulled out a yellow notepad from the kitchen drawer and sat down at the table. The coffee was still brewing, but my mind was already racing. If I was really going to do this, host my own Thanksgiving, it had to mean something. Not just a meal. Not a pity party. I wanted to share a table with people who had shown up for me. In big ways and small. People who had stayed when they didn't have to. I started writing names, slowly at first, then faster, as faces filled my head. First on the list was Carl. He was my unit's mechanic during my second deployment. A man with weathered hands and a quiet laugh. When I broke down the night we lost Sergeant Myers, he sat with me on the floor of the supply tent, handing me a protein bar and telling a story about a busted Humvee that somehow made me laugh until I cried. I hadn't seen him in years, but I knew he'd come. Then there was Tanya. She'd been my neighbor for only 6 months before I got reassigned. Single mom, 2 kids named Lily and Leo. Worked nights as a nurse. The kind of person who never asked questions, just dropped off leftovers and warm cider on cold evenings. When I came home from surgery, she was the one who checked in, brought me groceries, and didn't make it awkward when I cried over cereal one afternoon. I added Julia next, retired master sergeant. She ran a community garden in town and taught me how to grow tomatoes without killing them. She was blunt, didn't care for small talk, and gave the best advice when I was thinking about buying the property out here. Once told me, the ground never judges. Just feed it and show up. There were others. Thomas, a chaplain who helped me write letters home for fallen soldiers when I couldn't find the words. Eli, the UPS guy who'd waved every week for 3 years and once helped me carry a busted bookshelf inside during a snowstorm. Mrs. Patel from the corner store, who always set aside my favorite tea and told me I reminded her of her niece. These weren't people I saw every day, but every one of them had seen me. Not my rank, not my resume. Me. I bought a pack of blank cards from the general store, cream-colored, textured. I sat at my kitchen table and handwrote each invitation. Nothing formal. Just a note saying, I'm hosting Thanksgiving this year. No pressure. Just food, warmth, and faces that matter to me. You're one of them. Then came the deliveries. I drove out to Julia's garden, handed her the envelope while she was elbow-deep in compost. She squinted at the handwriting, then gave me a long, knowing nod. Took you long enough. I left Tanya's card, tucked in her screen door with a small jar of apple butter I'd canned the month before. She texted a heart emoji later that night, followed by, We'll be there, all 3 of us. Carl was harder to track down. I called an old contact who gave me his new address in Pennsylvania. I mailed the invite with a photo of us from Kuwait. Scribbled, Still got your 6 on the back. With each card, something shifted in me. Like I was stitching together a quilt from scraps I didn't know I'd saved. Each thread pulled tighter, warmer. No one asked if Liz was coming. No one mentioned my parents. These were not the kind of people who measured worth by family trees or matching last names. They measured by presence, by kindness, by those who showed up when it mattered. I cleaned the guest house, aired out the spare bedrooms, and borrowed extra chairs from the local church. I called Eli to help move a long table into the sunroom, then bribed him with cider to stay and test the chairs. He laughed, said I'd better be making stuffing. As the day drew closer, I found myself looking forward to something I couldn't quite name. Not revenge, not replacement, just a connection, a room full of people I'd chosen, and who, in their own ways, had chosen me right back. That night, I stood at the window, lights off, watching moonlight settle over the field. My breath fogged up the glass, and I traced the outline of the land with my finger. This was my place. My people, my table. And for once, that felt like enough. The smell of roasted turkey hit me before I even opened the oven. Butter, thyme, garlic. The whole house felt warm, in a way that had nothing to do with the temperature. The sunroom glowed with soft light, filtered through windows fogged at the corners, candles flickering beside bowls of cranberry sauce and mashed sweet potatoes. People started arriving just before noon. Tanya brought 2 pies and a homemade casserole, her kids, Lily and Leo, trailing behind her with arms full of folding chairs. Julia came with fresh rolls wrapped in a dish towel and a bottle of something dark she refused to name until we toasted. Eli carried a stack of mismatched plates and a joke about my smoke detector that made everyone laugh before their coats were even off. Carl showed up later than most, walking with a slight limp and holding a 6-pack of root beer like it was gold. We hugged longer than necessary. No words, just that silent kind of recognition that only comes from shared sand and loss. He looked around the room and said, "You built this?" I nodded. He grinned. "Damn proud of you." We packed the table tight, chairs squeezed together, knees bumping, elbows brushing. No one complained. There was too much food, too much noise, too much everything. And it was perfect. We passed plates like currency, spooned generosity onto paper napkins, and filled cups faster than they could be emptied. Someone started telling a story about basic training, which led to a round of stories about the worst meals eaten in the field. Thomas, the chaplain, swore he once ate a protein bar that tasted like motor oil. Tanya's daughter, Lily, asked what an MRE was, and 5 people jumped in to explain at once. Her eyes got wide. Then she laughed and said she'd stick with her mac and cheese. I didn't sit much. I moved between rooms, topping off drinks, checking the rolls, taking photos with my old Polaroid. But every time I paused, I found myself smiling. Not the kind of smile you fake through holidays or family tension. A real one. The kind that sits deep in your chest and says, "This is what it's supposed to feel like." At some point, Julia tapped her glass and asked if we could go around the table and say what we were thankful for. I braced for something awkward, but what followed was simple and honest. Tanya said she was thankful for second chances. Eli said warmth and pie, in that order. Carl just said, "This," and raised his bottle. When it got to me, I didn't have a speech ready. I looked at the table, at the people crammed into my little house with their laughter and their open hearts, and I said, "I'm thankful for the ones who showed up, and for the fact that I stopped waiting on the ones who didn't." No one clapped. No one had to. It was enough. Later, after the plates had been cleared and people began to stretch and yawn and drift toward the door, Leo, Tanya's son, handed me a folded piece of paper. It was a drawing of all of us around the table. Stick figures with smiles and a turkey twice the size of the table. At the top, in wobbly crayon, he wrote, "Captain Maria's family dinner." I kept that paper, still have it taped to my fridge. That night, after everyone was gone and the last dish was rinsed, I stood in the doorway of the sunroom and looked at the empty chairs, the crumbs, the smudged glasses, and for once, I didn't feel empty at all. The call came the next morning. I let it ring twice before I answered. Liz's name lit up my screen like a flare I didn't want to follow. She didn't even say hello, just launched into it. "Why didn't you tell us you were hosting Thanksgiving?" Mom saw the photos Julia posted. I took a breath, steady and slow. "Because it wasn't for you." There was a pause, the kind that comes when someone expects you to backpedal. Then the tone shifted. She said I was being dramatic, that I was making them out to be the villains, that I'd embarrassed them by making it public. I didn't respond to any of it. I just said, "You all made your choices. I'm finally making mine." She hung up before I could say more. I stood there for a moment, the silence humming louder than the conversation had been. 2 hours later, a knock at the door. My parents. They looked smaller than I remembered, or maybe I'd just grown. My mother stepped in without waiting to be invited. My father lingered on the porch. She glanced around the room, eyes landing on the drawing still taped to my fridge. Then, the leftover pie containers stacked by the sink. "This is what you've been doing?" she asked, voice clipped. "Playing house with strangers?" I didn't flinch. "No, hosting a holiday with people who actually see me." She frowned, as if confused by my calm. My father finally came inside, arms crossed. eyes avoiding mine. "You should have said something," he muttered. "We didn't know you felt this way." "Oh," I laughed, not out of humor, but from how absurd that sentence sounded after a lifetime of silence. "You knew. You just didn't care enough to change it." My mother opened her mouth, probably to defend herself. I cut her off. "I'm done begging for crumbs. I'm done proving I deserve to be loved." The words hung in the air like smoke. No one moved. Julia stepped in from the sunroom then, carrying a tray of coffee. She didn't say anything, just nodded at me, then set the tray down and gave my mother a long, steady look. Tanya followed behind her with the kids, whispering something about coloring books. Carl stood near the hallway, arms folded, quiet but there. My parents took it all in. The people, the warmth, the lives I'd built without them. My mother's shoulders tightened. "This isn't family." I stepped forward, calm, steady. "It is to me." That was it. No yelling, no tears. Just a door gently closing after they left, their footsteps crunching down my gravel driveway without looking back. I didn't watch them leave. I turned to the kitchen, where Tanya was peeling oranges and Julia was pouring coffee like nothing had happened. I sat down, accepted a cup, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. The last car pulled away just after sunset. The porch light flickered softly, casting long shadows across the gravel. Inside, the house was quiet again, but it wasn't the kind of quiet that hurt. It was warm, filled with the ghosts of laughter and the smell of leftover pie. I moved slowly through the house, picking up glasses, folding napkins, running my fingers along the edge of the table. Each smudge, each crumb left behind, was a small reminder that people had been here. Not out of obligation, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. On the fridge, the drawing still held its spot. Captain Maria's family dinner, written in big, uneven letters. Little stick figures holding hands, all with huge smiles and square turkey legs in front of them. I couldn't stop looking at how honest it was. How much truth can a kid put in a few lines and crayons? Earlier that day, Lily had tugged on my sleeve and whispered, "I wish you were my aunt." I bent down and asked her why, and she said, "Because you make everything feel like home." Then she hugged me and ran off before I could say a word. I sat down at the table, just for a moment. No dishes to scrub, no guests to greet, just the low hum of the heater and the soft tick of the clock. My shoulders dropped a little more with every breath. I hadn't realized how much weight I'd been carrying until it was gone. This was mine. All of it. The space, the people, the peace. It didn't come from blood or duty or some twisted sense of loyalty. It came from choice, from showing up, from letting go of what never held me. I used to think family was something you were born into, something you fought to keep even when it hurt. But sitting there, surrounded by the quiet echo of love freely given, I finally understood. Family is who stays when the noise dies down. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing it anymore. I was living it,